The air in Austin's convention center felt electric that February morning. 200 Democratic Party delegates shuffled into their seats, coffee cups trembling slightly in their hands. They knew what was coming. Everyone knew. James Talarico stood backstage, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. At 34, the former public school teacher had become the unexpected conscience of Texas progressives, a man who quoted scripture and Marx with equal fluency, who could make voters cry talking about underfunded classrooms. His staff called him the professor. His opponents called him naive. 3 doors down, Jasmine Crockett paced like a caged panther. The Dallas congresswoman had built her reputation on viral moments, the kind of sharp, unfiltered takedowns that generated millions of views and dominated news cycles for days. Her team didn't prepare talking points, they prepared ammunition. This wasn't supposed to happen. The 2026 Senate race against Republican incumbent Ted Cruz should have unified Texas Democrats. Instead, it had become a civil war. 60 seconds, a stagehand called out. Talarico opened his eyes. Crockett cracked her knuckles. The Democratic Party of Texas was about to tear itself apart on live television. Rewind 6 months. Summer 2025. The Texas Democratic establishment had a plan. Recruit a moderate, well-funded candidate who could appeal to suburban voters, avoid controversy, and maybe, just maybe, flip a Senate seat in America's second-largest state. That plan died the moment Talarico announced his candidacy. The former teacher had spent 5 years in the Texas House representing a suburban Austin district, quietly building a reputation as the Democrat who could talk to anyone. He attended Baptist churches and Muslim community centers with equal comfort. He'd passed legislation with Republican votes. His speeches about economic justice quoted both Jesus and labor organizers. Progressive activists loved him. Party donors were terrified of him. James represents everything the party claims to want, said Maria Gonzalez, a Austin-based political consultant. He's authentic, he's brilliant, and he makes voters feel something. The problem? He makes donors nervous. He won't play the game. 2 weeks after Talarico's announcement, Jasmine Crockett jumped in. The contrast was immediate and total. Where Talarico spoke in measured paragraphs, Crockett delivered quotable grenades. Where Talarico built bridges, Crockett burned them down, then posted the video. She'd gone viral during congressional hearings, dismantling Republican arguments with prosecutorial precision and barely concealed contempt. Her message to Texas Democrats was simple: stop being polite, start winning. We've spent decades trying to convince people we're reasonable, Crockett told a Houston crowd in August. You know what reasonable got us? Greg Abbott, Ted Cruz, a state that treats women's bodies like government property. I'm done being reasonable. The room exploded. By January 2026, internal polling showed the Democratic primary split almost exactly down the middle. Talarico led in rural areas and among older voters who appreciated his respectful tone. Crockett dominated urban centers and younger demographics who wanted a fighter, not a diplomat. The party establishment panicked. A brutal primary would drain resources and create wounds that might not heal before November. They demanded a debate, a chance for the candidates to find common ground, to remember they were on the same team. Instead, they got a detonation. The moderator, a veteran Texas political reporter, opened with a softball. What makes you the best candidate to defeat Ted Cruz? Talarico went first. He spoke about his grandmother, who cleaned houses for 40 years and never made more than minimum wage. He talked about teaching 5th graders whose parents worked 3 jobs. He described a vision of Texas politics rooted in dignity, in moral clarity, in the belief that people were hungry for something beyond partisan warfare. We don't need to out-yell Republicans, he said quietly. We need to out-love them, out-organize them, outwork them. The people of Texas are exhausted by anger. They want hope. Scattered applause. The Talarico supporters nodded approvingly. The Crockett camp looked bored. Then it was her turn. Crockett stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. Hope? She let the word hang in the air like an insult. We've been hoping for 50 years. We hoped in 2018 when Beto almost won. We hoped in 2020. We hoped in 2022. You know what we got? The most restrictive abortion ban in America. Book bans, attacks on trans kids, A power grid that kills people every winter. Her voice rose, sharp as broken glass. Ted Cruz left Texans freezing in their homes while he flew to Cancun. And my opponent wants to talk about love. I don't need to love Ted Cruz. I need to beat him, and I'm the only one on this stage who's shown I can do that. The Crockett section erupted. Talarico's supporters sat in stunned silence. The moderator tried to regain control. Mr. Talarico, your response? What happened next would be replayed 10 million times on social media. Talarico stood slowly, deliberately. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but it cut through the noise like a sermon. Congresswoman Crockett is right about one thing. Ted Cruz is cruel. He's self-serving. He represents everything wrong with our politics. But here's what I know about Texas. The people who will decide this election aren't watching cable news. They're not on Twitter. They're the woman working the overnight shift at Walmart, the rancher in West Texas who hasn't voted Democrat since Carter, the suburban mom who's disgusted by Republicans but doesn't trust Democrats either. He paused, looked directly at Crockett. You want to know the difference between us? You're running to be a Democrat who wins. I'm running to be a Texan who serves. And Texans don't respond to anger. They respond to authenticity. The room went silent. Even Crockett's supporters stopped cheering. Then Crockett smiled. Not a warm smile, a predator's smile. That's beautiful, James. Really, it's the kind of thing that sounds great in a TED Talk. But let me tell you what authenticity means in Texas politics right now. It means the state legislature just passed a law making it easier to carry a gun than to vote. It means women are dying because doctors are too scared to provide health care. It means teachers, your profession, James, are being threatened for teaching accurate history. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to strain to hear. You want to love Ted Cruz to death? Fine. But I've been in that Senate chamber. I've watched him mock the victims of mass shootings. I've seen him lie to grieving parents. And I learned something. You don't defeat fascism with a hug. You defeat it by fighting back. The word fascism landed like a bomb. Talarico's face hardened. For the first time all debate, his careful composure cracked. Is that what we're doing now? Calling every Republican a fascist? Making sure that half of Texas knows we view them as the enemy before we even start the conversation? If the jackboot fits, Crockett started. This is exactly the problem. Talarico's voice rose not to a shout, but to something more powerful, genuine emotion. We've created a Democratic Party that speaks only to Democrats, that performs for Twitter, that measures success in viral moments instead of changed lives. I taught in Texas public schools. I know what we're up against, but I also know that the answer isn't to become what we claim to oppose. The moderator tried to intervene. Neither candidate noticed. What followed was less a debate than a philosophical war conducted at close range. Crockett attacked Talarico's legislative record. You voted yes on a Republican budget bill. You compromised on school funding. You worked with legislators who want to ban books and erase LGBTQ+ students from existence. At what point does bipartisanship become collaboration? Talarico fired back. I passed actual legislation that put money in teachers' pockets, real wins for real people. What have your viral moments accomplished besides building your personal brand? Name one Republican vote you've changed, one mind you've opened, one person you've convinced. I don't want to convince them. Crockett's voice echoed off the walls. I want to outvote them. This isn't a graduate seminar, James. This is a fight for survival. And we need someone who's willing to fight. Fighting isn't the same as winning. And being nice hasn't won us anything in Texas for 30 years. The moderator finally regained control, calling for a commercial break. But the damage was done. The cameras captured everything. Talarico's jaw clenched in frustration, Crockett's eyes blazing with righteous fury, the delegates splitting into two camps, literally moving to opposite sides of the room. When the debate resumed, the questions became sharper, more personal. Mr. Talarico, Congresswoman Crockett has accused you of being too soft on Republicans. Some progressive groups have called you a Republican light candidate. How do you respond? Talarico looked tired. I'm not Republican light, I'm reality-based. I represent a district that includes both Austin liberals and conservative suburbs. I've learned that people don't fit into neat boxes. The single mom who opposes abortion might also support higher minimum wage. The veteran who loves his guns might also want universal health care. Governing means finding the common ground, not retreating to our corners. Congresswoman Crockett, Mr. Talarico has suggested that your confrontational style alienates moderate voters. Do you worry that you're too polarizing to win a statewide race in Texas? Crockett laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Polarizing. Barack Obama was polarizing. Hillary Clinton was polarizing. Stacey Abrams was polarizing. You know what that word means when they use it about Democrats. It means we're black. It means we're women. It means we refuse to apologize for existing. I'm not here to make white moderates comfortable. I'm here to mobilize the voters who've been ignored, dismissed, and taken for granted. That's not fair, Talarico started. Isn't it? Crockett whirled on him. Let's be honest about what's happening here. I'm a black woman from Dallas who came from nothing. You're a white man from the suburbs who went to elite schools. The party establishment is terrified of me because I don't play by their rules. They love you because you're safe. You're the candidate who won't scare the donors. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Talarico's response was quiet, measured and devastating. My mother was a single parent who worked as a waitress. I paid for college with student loans I'm still paying off. I chose teaching because I believed in public service, not profit. And I've spent my entire career fighting for the people you claim to represent. The difference between us isn't our backgrounds, Jasmine. It's our strategies. You want to win by making Republicans the villain. I want to win by making Democrats the solution. But the exchange that broke the internet came near the end, during closing statements. Crockett had just finished a passionate appeal about the urgency of the moment, climate change, voting rights, reproductive freedom, when Talarico made his final pitch. I want to talk to the Texans watching at home who are tired of the yelling, tired of the division. Tired of politicians who seem more interested in their next viral moment than your next paycheck. I'm offering you something different, a politics of dignity, of service, of actual solutions. He paused, looking directly into the camera. This election isn't about performing outrage, it's about earning trust. And if you give me the chance to be your senator, I promise you this, I will work for every Texan, Republican, Democrat, Independent. I will answer to you, not to my Twitter mentions. I will measure success, not in headlines, but in lives changed. It was a good closing, maybe even a great one. Then Crockett stood for her rebuttal, and the room held its breath. James just promised to work for every Texan. That sounds nice, but let me tell you who Ted Cruz works for. Billionaire donors, oil companies, anyone who'll write a check. And when Texans needed him, when our children were freezing, when our power grid failed, he got on a plane to Cancun. She stepped closer to Talarico, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. So here's my promise. I will fight like hell. I will be loud. I will be aggressive. I will make Ted Cruz and every Republican enabler in this state UN comfortable every single day, because that's what it takes. Not prayers, not hope, not reaching across the aisle to people who want to drag us back to the 1950s. Fighting. She turned to face the audience full on. The question for Democratic primary voters is simple. Do you want someone who will make Republicans feel good about bipartisanship, or do you want someone who will make them lose? The Crockett section exploded in cheers. The Talarico supporters sat stone-faced. The debate ended. The war had just begun. The media reaction was instant and overwhelming. MSNBC ran segments titled Democratic Civil War in Texas. CNN brought in panels to debate confrontation versus collaboration in modern politics. Fox News gleefully aired clips of Democrats attacking each other, adding gleeful commentary about party chaos. But the real battle was happening online. Within 2 hours, Talarico vs. Crockett was trending nationwide. TikTok filled with clips, most of them favoring Crockett's more quotable moments. Twitter divided into camps, with blue-check progressives largely backing Crockett's aggressive approach, while a smaller contingent defended Talarico's call for coalition building. Crockett ATE wrote one popular progressive account. This is what we need. No more nice Democrats who get steamrolled. Talarico is the only one talking like he wants to actually win in November, countered another. Viral moments don't equal votes in Texas. The fundraising numbers told their own story. In the 48 hours after the debate, Crockett raised $2.3 million from small donors nationwide, many of them out-of-state progressives energized by her performance. Talarico raised $890,000, mostly from Texas-based donors and labor unions. But internal polling revealed something more complex. Among Democratic primary voters, Crockett surged to a 12-point lead. Among general election voters, including Republicans and independents who might cross over, Talarico maintained a narrow advantage in hypothetical matchups against Cruz. The question became, was it better to win the primary decisively and risk losing moderates, or to appeal to the middle and risk losing the base? By March, the Texas Democratic establishment had fractured completely. The old guard, former office holders, major donors, county chairs, largely lined up behind Talarico. They saw him as the safe bet, the candidate who could navigate Texas's complicated political geography. They released statements praising his measured approach and commitment to coalition building. The activist base revolted. Progressive groups, led by younger organizers and people of color, rallied behind Crockett. They argued that decades of playing nice had accomplished nothing in Texas except losing. They pointed to her congressional record, her viral confrontations with Republicans, her fundraising prowess. "The establishment wants us to nominate someone who won't offend anyone," said Carlos Rivera, a Houston-based organizer. "That's how we keep losing." Jasmine represents the future of this party, unapologetic, diverse, and willing to fight. The split wasn't just ideological, it was generational, racial, and strategic. Talarico's coalition skewed older, whiter, more rural. His town halls drew modest crowds of engaged citizens who asked detailed policy questions. His campaign emphasized doors knocked, conversations held, relationships built. Crockett's movement ran on energy and urgency. Her rallies felt like concerts, packed venues, celebrity endorsers, social media influencers streaming live. When she spoke in Dallas, 5,000 people showed up. When she posted on TikTok, millions watched. The contrast created a fundamental question: what kind of campaign wins in Texas? They met again in April, at a candidate forum in Houston focused on healthcare. The atmosphere was different this time, more hostile, less performative. Both candidates knew the stakes. Polling showed the race tightening. Early voting was weeks away. Every word mattered. The moderator asked about expanding Medicaid in Texas, a non-expansion state where hundreds of thousands lacked healthcare coverage. Talarico gave a wonky, detailed answer about building coalitions with business groups and rural hospitals to pressure the Republican legislature. He talked about incremental progress, about finding Republican allies, about the long game. Crockett's response was withering. Incremental progress. People are dying. They're rationing insulin. They're skipping cancer screenings. They're declaring bankruptcy because they got sick. And my opponent wants to talk about the long game. How long should they wait, James? Another decade? 2. Talarico tried to respond, but Crockett wasn't finished. "You keep talking about working with Republicans. Okay, name one. Name one Republican in the Texas legislature who's willing to expand Medicaid. I'll wait." The silence was excruciating. "That's what I thought," Crockett continued, "because they don't exist. The Republican Party isn't interested in your bipartisan fantasies. They want to win. And they're willing to let Texans suffer to do it. So we can either acknowledge that reality and fight accordingly, or we can keep losing while congratulating ourselves for being civil." This time Talarico didn't try to stay calm. His frustration boiled over. "You want to know why I don't have a list of Republican names ready? Because I actually work with them instead of performing for cameras. I spend my time in committee meetings, in one-on-one conversations, building relationships that lead to actual legislation. That's not as sexy as a viral clip, but it's how governing works." "Governing?" Crockett shot back. "James, you're in the minority party in the Texas House. You're not governing, you're spectating. At least I'm in Congress actually blocking bad bills, actually holding Republicans accountable on national television. What are you blocking in Austin except your own ambition?" The personal nature of the attack shocked even the moderator. Talarico's response was ice cold. "At least I'm not building a career on performing outrage while accomplishing nothing of substance." The room gasped. Even Crockett seemed momentarily taken aback, but she recovered quickly, and when she did, her counterattack was surgical. "Accomplishing nothing. I've passed amendments. I've stopped harmful legislation. I've used my platform to raise millions for abortion funds, for bail funds, for mutual aid organizations. I've made Republicans afraid to lie in hearings because they know I'll call them out. What have you done besides make donors feel good about themselves?" The Houston forum ended badly, both candidates storming off stage, neither willing to shake hands for the cameras. The imagery was devastating. Democrats so divided they couldn't even fake unity. National media picked up the story.
The New York Times ran a front-page analysis. Texas Democratic primary reveals party's deep strategic divide. The Washington Post published dueling op-eds from progressive and moderate commentators. But the real damage was happening on the ground. Party volunteers in Dallas reported shouting matches between Talarico and Crockett supporters at county conventions. Phone banks descended into arguments about strategy and purity tests. Longtime friends stopped speaking to each other over the primary. "It's gotten personal in a way I've never seen," said Linda Martinez, a 62-year-old party activist from San Antonio. "People aren't just disagreeing about candidates. They're questioning each other's commitment to the party, to progressive values, to defeating Republicans. It's toxic." The party leadership tried to broker peace. They convened meetings with both campaigns, pleading for a ceasefire, warning that the divisions would hand Cruz another term. Both candidates refused. "I'm not going to pretend we don't have fundamental disagreements about how to win," Talarico told party officials privately. "The primary exists for voters to make this choice." Crockett was more blunt. "They want me to play nice because they're scared of a black woman who fights back. Not happening." By May, with early voting underway, the candidates agreed to one last debate, this time moderated by a national network, broadcast across Texas and live-streamed nationwide. Both campaigns knew this was it, the final chance to shift momentum, to land a knockout blow, to convince undecided voters. The crowd at the San Antonio venue was evenly split, half wearing Talarico Texas First t-shirts, half in Crockett Fight Back gear. Security was tight. The tension was suffocating. The debate opened with questions about the economy, about immigration, about education, standard stuff. Both candidates performed well, hitting their talking points, avoiding major mistakes. Then came the question that changed everything. "Mr. Talarico, Congresswoman Crockett, many Democrats are concerned that this primary has become too divisive, that whoever wins will face a unified Republican Party with a fractured base. If you lose, will you enthusiastically support your opponent against Ted Cruz?" Talarico answered first, "Absolutely, without hesitation. Any Democrat is better than Ted Cruz. I'll knock doors, I'll make calls, I'll do whatever it takes to help us win in November." Crockett's pause was barely perceptible, maybe 2 seconds. But in politics, 2 seconds is an eternity. "Of course I'll support the nominee," she finally said. "But let's be clear, if Democrats nominate someone who won't fight, we'll lose, and that loss will be on all of us." The caveat landed like a grenade. Talarico seized on it immediately. "Did you hear that? Of course, but that's not unity, that's a threat. Jasmine saying that if she doesn't win, she'll blame the party for losing. That's not leadership, that's ego. Don't twist my words." Crockett started. "I'm not twisting anything. You just told Texas Democrats that you'll only support the nominee if it's you, that you'll sabotage a general election campaign if you don't get your way. That's not fighting for Texas, that's fighting for yourself." Crockett's eyes flashed dangerously. "You want to talk about ego? You're the one who positioned yourself as the moral candidate, as if everyone who disagrees with your approach is somehow corrupt or performative. You've spent this entire campaign suggesting that I'm not a serious person, that viral moments don't matter, that activism is somehow less valuable than your legislative record of, what? Passing a few minor bills with Republican support. Those minor bills helped real people, and my viral moments mobilized millions. They raised money for abortion access. They exposed Republican hypocrisy. They gave people who feel powerless a reason to believe we can fight back." The moderator tried to intervene, but both candidates ignored him. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Talarico said, his voice rising. "You measure success in views and clicks. I measure it in changed policy and helped constituents. You want to be famous. I want to be effective. Famous." Crockett's voice cracked like a whip. "I grew up in poverty. I put myself through law school. I fought for every single thing I have. Don't you dare suggest that I'm in this for fame. I'm in this because I'm tired of watching people like Ted Cruz treat Texas like their personal playground, while real Texans suffer. Then why does every position you take seem designed for maximum social media engagement? Why does every speech sound like it was written for a TikTok clip? Because that's how you reach people. You want to have quiet conversations in church basements? Fine. But I'm building a movement. I'm mobilizing voters who've been ignored. I'm speaking their language, on their platforms, about their struggles. Just because you don't understand modern communication doesn't make it invalid." What happened next stunned everyone watching. Talarico, visibly shaking with anger or emotion, or both, stepped away from his podium. He looked directly at Crockett, not at the camera, not at the audience, but at her. "You want to know what I really think?" His voice was quiet but carried across the silent room. "I think you're brilliant. I think you're talented. I think you could be an incredible senator, but I also think you've convinced yourself that cruelty and confrontation are the same as courage, that performing anger is the same as creating change, and I'm terrified that if you win this primary, you'll energize our base and alienate everyone else. We'll have the most viral campaign in Texas history and lose by 8 points. Crockett stood frozen, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, and her voice was different, lower, harder, more personal than anything she'd said before. And I think you've convinced yourself that compromise is the same as principle, that being liked is more important than being right. You talk about coalition building, but what you really mean is surrender. You want to win Republican votes by promising not to challenge Republican power. You want to defeat Ted Cruz by becoming him, just with better manners. The two stood there, 10 feet apart, the full weight of their philosophical divide laid bare. I don't want to become him, Talarico said softly. I want to replace him, and that requires building a coalition broader than our comfort zone. And I want to beat him, Crockett replied, which requires mobilizing people who've never voted because they've never had anyone worth voting for. The moderator finally stepped in. We need to move on. No, Talarico said, still looking at Crockett. We need to finish this, because Texas Democrats deserve to know what they're choosing between. It's not just two candidates, it's two theories of change, two visions of what it means to fight for justice, and honestly, I don't know which one wins anymore. The admission hung in the air, raw, honest, devastating. Crockett's response was equally unguarded. Neither do I, but I know what happens if we keep doing what we've always done. We lose, and I'm not interested in losing gracefully anymore. Primary day arrived with Texas in the grip of record heat and Democratic voters facing an impossible choice. Vote for Talarico, bet on coalition building, on reaching beyond the base, on the possibility that Texans were hungry for something different than partisan warfare. Vote for Crockett, bet on mobilization, on energizing the base, on the belief that winning required matching Republican aggression with Democratic resistance. The turnout shocked political observers. Nearly 2.4 million Democrats voted unprecedented for a primary in a state that hadn't elected a Democrat statewide since 1994. As results rolled in, the divide became geographic and demographic reality. Crockett dominated urban centers, Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. She won younger voters by massive margins, black voters by even more. Her message of unapologetic resistance resonated with Democrats tired of losing, tired of compromising, tired of being told to wait. Talarico carried rural counties, suburban districts and older voters. His appeal to coalition building and moral clarity found purchase with Democrats who'd lived through decades of partisan warfare and longed for something different. By midnight, with 87% reporting, Crockett led by 3.2 points. By 2 a.m., it tightened to 1.8 points. At 4 a.m., with 98% reporting, the Associated Press called it. Jasmine Crockett had won the Democratic primary with 50.9% of the vote.